Hello and welcome to the Joe's Art History Podcast, a podcast which celebrates all things art historical every single day. It's episode 14, and on today's podcast I sit down with artist Gary Mansfield. Gary is a London-based artist. He is also a podcaster and is the mastermind behind the incredibly successful Ministry of Arts podcast. And he is also a passionate Arts for All activist who claims that art saved his life, really. Gary has an incredibly interesting background, and his story of how he came to be an artist is one that you don't hear too often. Gary himself explains better in the podcast, because I feel that the best person to tell your story is of course you. But it was during serving a 14-year prison sentence that Gary, during a prison art class, came across the work of Ray Richardson, and the rest, they say, is history. It's a really interesting episode that really hits home the power that art can have, and also why it's really important to look again and not judge something so quickly. And I mean that for everything. In this podcast, we talk about the YBAs, aka the Young British Artists, as well as the artwork that has gone on to not only inspire Gary and his outpour, but also the collaborations that it's led to and the interesting things he is doing within the British art scene. This is such an interesting chat, and it was a real pleasure to have Gary on the podcast. So sit back and relax and enjoy Gary Mansfield talking about the art that saved him. I came across you on Instagram because you are the host of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Yeah. And as well as that, you're also an artist, but you've got a really, really interesting story of how you came to art.
It's pretty much my USP, really.
Everyone needs a unique selling point, Gary. So do you want to just, if it's all right with you, just give us a little bit of sort of background of who you are? Because I feel you're the best person to tell your story is you, really.
Yeah, by all means. Well, I'm sort of an unlikely artist, really. I grew up having no interaction with art until I was pretty much 27. I was a criminal for my early life. I ended up being set up by a drugs gang and got 14 years in prison, which was where I discovered art. And not only did I discover art, I quickly found out I had a talent for it, a hidden talent. Thanks to an excellent art tutor, I discovered the Sensations show, which was on at the time. I didn't like conceptual art, didn't appreciate it, I didn't understand it. And then the tutors brought in the Sensations catalogue, and I found an artwork in there by Monotone, which made me sort of fall in love with conceptual art overnight. There was nothing about the art in the library, so I contacted 32 of the artists that were in the Sensations catalogue. In the back of the catalogue was the gallery that represented them. So I sent a letter to each artist via their gallery. And out of that 28 artists, the likes of Gavin Turk, Sarah Lucas, Gary Hume, the massive big names, 28 of them replied. And throughout the rest of my sentence, which was a further 6 years, many of them supported and mentored me and pushed me towards my fine art degree, which I started just before I was released several years later.
I just think that's amazing, because what a way to sort of use that time and sort of turn it into something positive, which is, I think, like you said, why your story is so fascinating. But for people that don't know what Sensation or Sensations was, can you give a little bit of background to the exhibition and who did it show? Why was it important?
Well, Sensations was a show put together by Charles Saatchi at the Royal Academy. It was a collection of his artwork that at the time it was the likes of Damien Hirst, Chapman Brothers, Sarah Lucas, Tracy Emin, as I say, the big names of conceptual and contemporary art. and it caused a ruckus, thanks to the PR as well, caused a ruckus around the major capitals of the world with the artwork that was involved. And as I say, it was artwork that I definitely used the old cliche of "that's not art, anyone can do that."
Yep.
And I often say about Damien Hirst cutting a sheep in half. We had a fella similar in D-Wing. But yeah, it was art that I didn't appreciate, I didn't understand, and the Mona Hatoum piece in particular, the one that made me come around to that type of art, it's one that we speak about earlier. Would you rather speak about it then, or
no? You can speak. You can speak about it now. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So what was the piece? What did it just sort of visually look like?
It was, the piece by Mona Hatoum was called No Way To, and it was simply an upside down colander with nuts and bolts through all of the holes. And when I saw it, I didn't understand how that was in this massive exhibition, because to me that was a trip to B&Q's and a £10 note. I didn't see the relevance of it as an artwork, because at that point, being fresh into art, having no understanding, I thought an artwork had to take months and months of painting or sculpting or hacking away at a piece of marble. And then I should say that the Mona Hatoum one was on a postcard being used as a bookmark, and on the back of it had a little explanation about No Way To, and it said something along the lines of, it explained that Mona Hatoum come to the UK to study. While she was in the UK, there was a regime change or something political at home. An educated woman was no longer sort of welcome at home, and she couldn't go back to her own country.
Yeah.
And this colander symbolised a dome over her homeland, and the nuts and bolts were blocking each entrance and exit from that country. And then, probably because of my situation, where I was in and couldn't get out, it resonated with me. And I just sort of looked at this colander and I've gone like, fucking hell, how can she explain all of that with that trip to B&Q and a £10 note?
Yeah.
And it sort of unlocked the conceptual art lock that I had in my mind, And then it made me look at each of these artworks in a different light. So when I was reading about each artwork, I was no longer going, what a load of bollocks. As I know that's not quite art speak, but that's how I was seeing
it.
I
think it's how most people look at it. I mean,
exactly.
These so they're called the YBAs, the Young British Artists. They use all these weird and wonderful, wacky materials. And even me, I don't know a huge amount about the YBAs. You've actually inspired my latest Instagram series, actually, in prep for this talk. So I'm looking into the YBAs because like you, when you sent me what you wanted to talk about, I was like, what the hell is that?
Exactly.
And that's 5 years of university training, and my response is, what on earth is this? But it's kind of like, you need to look for the story behind the artwork or behind the canvas.
It's in its title, which I didn't understand. Conceptual art is all about the concept.
Yeah.
And the way I always try to conceptual art is very hard to understand. I'm well aware of that. But I like to think that with when I give talks and I go into prisons, I give talks and lectures at universities and stuff, and I like to think that it's more accessible hearing something complicated from someone with an accent like mine. It makes people realise that it can be understood when they're listening to someone like me. And the way I explain it is, conceptual art is just, it's all about the concept of the artwork. What you're looking at is just a 3D representation of their idea, of their concept.
Yeah.
So as I say, with Mona Hatoum and this colander with nuts and bolts in it, that is just the most simplest way that she can break down a hugely complex problem and situation, and she's broken it all down. She's got rid of sort of pattern, colour and, painting and texture. She's got rid of all of that and just made this really simple object that if we take time to read this little bit of text next to the artwork, we'll understand that it is of massive importance, that colander and that nut and bolt. And I see that a little bit as me as well, because when people see me or hear me in a gallery and I talk like I do, I swear too much, I laugh and joke a lot, and I'm quite loud. I know I can be I know I can be the irritating guy in the room.
You've literally just explained what it is to be Scottish almost and working in the art world.
But I see that as me as well, because I know that I'm multi-layered. And if people have the time to listen to me and don't treat me like a conceptual piece of artwork where you go, what's he doing here,
Yeah.
When they realise that I've got a backstory and I'm pretty well educated, I'm pretty well read with the books that all of these artists sent me over the years, hundreds of books to do with conceptual art. I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means, but I've got a good knowledge and understanding. So when people see me, their first impression, I now like them to have the wrong impression. Because, when I've gone to universities and given lectures, it is like the comedian Mickey Flanagan says, oh, someone's let the window cleaner in,
His bouncer's a bit full of himself, yeah.
Exactly. So I've come to terms with how people perceive me when they first hear me.
Yeah.
And I used to really dislike it. It really used to get on my nerves.
Yeah.
But now I've come to embrace and rejoice it, because what they've got coming, they've got a good story. They've got a deep story. And a lot of the times, at the end of these talks, I get a standing ovation. There might be people, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I've had people crying at my talks. Yeah, well, that's it really, and every time I come away from a talk, the people have bought my work.
Yeah.
I've come home to find there's a couple of bits of work being sold.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, so I'm aware that the way I put things across, as much as it comes across quite vulnerable and my vocabulary isn't the best it could be, it works, and my voice is needed, I'm aware.
Oh my gosh, so much. And I think, someone like yourself, Gary, and even me, we're normal people, we're from very working class backgrounds, there's, we're not the typical sort of art scene, sleek, sexy, in you go sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's the thing that people find most off-putting for me. So I work in a gallery, and the question I'm asked the most is, am I okay to come in here? I can't afford to buy anything. And my rebuttal is always, neither can I, and I work here. Come on in. Because you just have to, people have to feel welcome. And I think there's something about that in the art world. Even somewhere like the Royal Academy, where the Sensations exhibition was, it's this huge, intimidating building. And for a lot of people that maybe don't know it's the RA, it's signposted and whatever, but you don't know if you can just walk in. And even when you do, you're greeted with this huge big staircase, these arches, wall, ceiling paintings, and people are like, oh God, I shouldn't be in here. Yes, you should. Yeah. You should, because it's for everybody. And we need people like you, Gary, who just come and, you don't need big fancy words to explain to people how you've just described Mona's artwork. For me, you've just hit that out of the park. Was Mona one of the artists that wrote to you, actually, from the exhibition?
Yeah. I mean, well, she was one that I wrote to and she replied with several catalogues, and I would reply to every artist that wrote to me. Bearing in mind, I had just discovered art, let alone conceptual art. We're talking from the moment I fell in love with art to discover conceptual art was about 3 months. Mm-hmm. So each artist would reply to me with a catalogue or a press pack, or even just a letter saying nice to meet you. I'll send you something when something comes up. That sort of thing. But every piece of text, be it press pack or catalogue, I read out of, I can't even think of the words to use, out of just pure thanks and gratitude. I read it from front page to back page. I understood, it may as well have been in, well, I was going to say it may as well have been in German. Sarah Lucas actually sent me a German one, and I even read that, convinced that by the end of it, I'll be able to speak a bit of German.
Yeah.
Not a fucking clue about any of it. But I read it all the same. Just to try and get a vibe of just to hope that there was some similar words in German as there was in English, to try and get a bit of it. But I would read from front to back of all of these catalogues. And then I started to understand the way they spoke. This confusing language that is art speak, I started to sort of understand or decipher rather.
Yeah.
And we don't need that language, and we do need that language. You don't need that language to get into art, but you do unfortunately need that language or some of it to get by in the art world. And it is a sort of tier system. It's an academic field, so it's not going to be easy, So as much as I say we should simplify art and the art world, it does need to be there as well, I think.
Yeah, but I think it could be, me personally, I think it could be brought about in a less intimidating way, but I think that's, social media has been really good at doing that, I suppose, and like opening it up to a wide amount of people and being told, oh, this is free, this is your collection, come on in. But yeah, I don't think it will change in our lifetime, but like you said, it's an academic university subject, but there's ways around it where you don't have to find that so intimidating or putting across in a way that's not so intimidating.
I mean, I've got to the point now where I don't find it intimidating. I mean, if I have a conversation I've had a few conversations with, I don't know, maybe a professor in that field, and I've had a podcast with them or a conversation with them, that is really intimidating at first.
Yeah.
But we do tend to meet a middle ground. They come down a bit to my level. I try to sort of go up slightly to, not to their level by any means, but come away from the real me and put the sort of, I'll throw a few S's and T's and H's in there. I know, I make the effort. But they generally find, they're generally aware, which is the feedback I get, they can feel the energy and my love of art.
Yeah.
And if you've got that much energy, that much love, and you can talk truthfully about art, it doesn't matter what fucking language you speak it in, really.
Yeah, here. I completely agree with you. Absolutely. So then moving on to one of your other works that you were that you've sent me, and it's one by Ray Richardson.
Yes, this is where I should have just gone, but like all the time, I go off on tangents.
But that's all right.
I get too excited.
The floor is yours, Gary. You can take it whatever you want.
Well, the Ray Richardson one that I sent you is one of his most recent ones, and I think you'll find that the modelling who was used for that is a damn fine-looking gentleman.
I did think that. He reminds me of someone, actually.
I know. Is it Brad Pitt? No, it's me, isn't it? So, Ray Richardson, the Sensations guys wasn't the first lot of artists I wrote to. The very first artist was an artist called Dougie Fields, who is he's like our Andy Warhol that not enough people know about. Okay. He's been about for years. Do you know Dougie Fields?
I don't know. Do you know what, though? I'm terrible with names. I would probably see his work and be like, oh my God, is that him? But I'm going to say no.
He's the very first artist that I made him the very first artist that I'd done a podcast with, because he was the very first artist that wrote to me. But Dougie was the first. And if I can just say, when I wrote to Dougie Fields, I had no idea of an address. I just read an article, liked his artwork, and it said in the article, which was by Zandra Rhodes, the designer, it said, my friend Dougie Fields from Earl's Court, blah, blah, blah. This is genuine. I sent Dougie a letter. It had Dougie Fields, artist, Earl's Court, London. It got there, and he replied.
That would not happen today.
How's that? But yeah, so moving on a month or so later, a couple of weeks later, the tutor brought into the prison art class a TV with a series that he'd recorded. I think it was called Oil on Canvas. And from what I can remember, it was a long time ago, there was 7 different episodes, and each episode looked at each element in art, be it colour, pattern, perspective, composition. You know, it looked at each area. The first one they showed was Patrck Hughrd. He was to do with perspective.
Yeah.
And if you know of Patrck Hughrd, he does these amazing visual illusion paintings that he calls reverse perspectives. He was exactly what I thought an artist was. He was a white, middle-class, well-educated white man who was a world away from me. He spoke beautifully, and he was, as much as I love Patrck, and I've been friends with him to this day, since like for nearly 20 years. He is the type of person that deterred me from thinking I could become an artist at that point. Next up was an artist called Ray Richardson from South East London. I saw his artwork before I heard him talk. His artwork is very cinematic. It's quite gritty oil paintings. They look like that there's a little element of menace in there. They look like they was painted in the early to mid 60s, you know, dark London. And then he spoke. And he spoke just like me. And it was literally one of those moments when you lift your head and open your eyes and your jaw drops a little bit. And I was like, fuck, he talks like me. And there's a programme about, he's got to be famous if there's a programme about him, you know. And he's talking about his artwork. And he was talking using similar words to Patrck, who we'd just seen, but he was doing it with a Cockney accent. And he was going, oh yeah, the fucking composition. Well, he didn't swear. He went, the composition is, you know, I've placed this juxtaposed to the tent, and he's using these art words or this language that I didn't quite understand, but he's saying it in my accent. And I was like, fuck, I can do it. I can be an artist. And it was because of Ray Richardson that I went, yes, I can and I will. And without Ray Richardson, I would just be an art lover. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but my life would not have changed 180 degrees like it has if it wasn't for Ray Richardson opening his mouth on that morning.
It's amazing when you have those sort of like epiphany moments where you just think, oh my God, and you don't even really realise how much your life is going to change from that point and from that experience. It's just it's just incredible. So then how did that, so then you struck up a friendship obviously with
Well, I wrote to Patrck and Ray via the company. I have no idea what the company was. Say it was Channel 4 for instance. I wrote to the production company at Channel 4. So it went to Channel 4, then to the production company, and then possibly if they was, I mean, if you imagine you're getting a letter from a prisoner saying, could you pass this to so-and-so? You're going to go, well, hold on a minute. This could be some, you know, murdering rapist for all I know. And that's quite a thing that they sort of did pass it forward, but they passed it forward anyway. Patrck replied, so did Ray. That was in 1998, over 20 years ago. Yeah. And, well, as you've seen there, Ray's used me in a muse. I think you can see just, where am I? Just, where's my arm? Just there is a little portrait of me.
Oh, nice.
That was done as a study for the one that you've got there, which is me in a rowing boat. It's supposed to be a reflection of Brexit. There's this bloke with an Admiral top. It just so happens I had this Admiral top on, and he saw me as this sailor of my own little boat, you know, very sort of Brexit inspired.
On your own waters sort of thing,
I'm pretty much up a creek. Although I've got paddles, I haven't got any water. So, you know, it's his sort of, just by using this fat, or rather, you know, rotund, highly attractive model. No, he's got a picture of me sat in this rowing boat, and unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to me at the time, he'd used me in several other paintings as well.
Really?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Which was, he doesn't realise how proud I was that he not only asked me, but he done these other paintings without me knowing.
Yeah.
and he put me in, because he's so inspirational to me. He's such an inspiration, and he has put me in a few of his paintings. It was, I can't even explain.
Yeah, and
it's up there with having my children.
Oh, that's amazing.
Nearly.
Ray still takes it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, right. Ray's in front.
And you've got an amazing podcast with Ray actually in his studio for your own. So I'll leave a link to that, because I think to get a real sense of who Ray is as a person. Also, you guys, like, it's quite a long one. I haven't finished listening to it yet, so I'm about an hour into it. But like, you play off each other beautifully. Like, it's just a real nice friendship. And
the end. Not the end. The last section of that podcast is possibly the greatest for me of any podcast. The greatest ending of any podcast that I will ever do.
Oh, don't say that to me now. I feel bad that I've not finished it. I'll finish it on my walk tonight.
It's my favourite. I won't say any more.
Okay, well, I will leave a link for listeners. I will leave a link down below to that podcast. Let's move on then to the third image that you sent me, Gary. And this is Sarah Lucas. And you've managed to make an appearance in this one as well.
Oh, I have. And I sort of, I'm not doing this for an ego thing.
No, I thought it was great.
Artists are so important to me.
Yeah.
Because, as I've said from here, I was a criminal. My criminality was in my family. If my family weren't criminals, they accepted criminality, as in they would buy a bit of cheap beef if it come about. They'd get a bit of hooky stuff here and there. Everyone I know was a criminal or on the fringes of it. My life is no longer like that. My children, I've broke the chain, and my children are no longer. My children would have been that. They're not. I've got very good, decent, and a biased opinion, good, decent, honest, caring, lovely children. Yeah. They would have been kids like me if art hadn't intervened in my life. So I refer to myself as a born-again artist.
Oh, there you are. Don't go knocking on people's doors, though.
Either way, I don't care. I've stood on many a tea box and preached. I know. Quite
right.
But Sarah Lucas was the first artist that replied to me from that Sensations batch that I sent out. It was her and her then boyfriend at the time. They both sent one to me. Angus Fairhurst, his name was.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's no longer with us.
Yeah, sadly.
They both sent me a joint package of their work. Yeah, she was the first one. And the guys on the wing, when these parcels turned up, they thought it was hilarious that I've got these, artists all writing to me. But Sarah was the first. And when I met Sarah, I met her at a Tim Noble and Sue Webster show in Milton Keynes when I was at university. And I was so nervous about going up to meet her. And when I met her, it was as if she was my cousin or something. Yeah. I wouldn't say long lost friend. It was, she was amazing. She was absolutely amazing. And when it come to me, I come out of the art world for a little while because of family situation. Mm-hmm. I couldn't afford to be an artist really. And I come out of it for a few years, got back into it, and I put together quite a big show, which involved me asking the artist to donate an artwork, and then I would damage it, but in the context of the artist or the artwork. It was to do with, it was called Face Value. It was to do with would the interjection of another person into one's life take any value from that person, like the people who set me up for this drugs thing. I now see that I am less of a person, or I feel less of a person, because I was used by these people and they damaged a part of me. So I wanted to try and do that to an artwork. If I took an artwork with some value from one artist and damaged it in some way, am I, as an artist, putting marks on it to increase its value or devalue it? And that's what I wanted to see. It was a sort of experiment. So all the work got sold, and if it sold for more, then my interjection, I become a good friend. If it was less, my interjection made me a bad friend. It was that sort of thing. And I was very nervous about putting the show together, and I contacted Sarah and said, like, I've got this idea, what do you think? And I figured, and I realised that most artists do edition prints, so that I thought, well, worst ways, I can ask some of these artists I know to donate a print that's worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 500 quid.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they would, because I thought, well, I would. So I asked Sarah. Sarah said, brilliant idea, go for it. Ask this person, this person, this person. Tell them that I'm involved. And I did. And it grew. And it grew. And Sarah said, I'll make you something. And I was like, oh, shit. This is no longer just... I could damage a £300 print. I got a phone call from Sarah's gallery, Sadie Cole's in the West End, saying, there's a package here for you to collect from Sarah.
Oh, my God.
So I went down to the gallery. I'm expecting a print in a tube.
Yeah.
There was a box. And I've come home, and in the box was a thing called tip bricks.
Okay.
And if you know Sarah's work, Sarah, or if you don't know Sarah's work, rather, Sarah is a feminist. She's quite political. She's very humorous in her work.
Yeah.
And these tip bricks were literally 4-inch square pieces of paving slab with a ball of, I think it's called K-pop, which is like a natural cotton wool.
Okay.
And over that was a cut down stocking with a knot tied in the end, and it went over the cotton wool, which made it look like a breast, and then it was placed over the brick which held it in place. There was 2 of them, so it looked like a pair of breasts, and on one it had Sarah, the other it had Lucas. I thought, oh, that's brilliant. We're in front of my fireplace here. I put one at this end and one at that end to see what it looked like on my fireplace. Then I put them back in the box. I put the box next to the settee. I was working at this, so I went to work. Then I got an email a couple of days later with all the information about this artwork, telling me that it was worth £18,000.
Oh my God, Gary! It's sitting in your front room.
I phoned up my partner and I said, you know that box that's next to the settee, underneath the ironing, if you like? Could you take it upstairs, put it in the cupboard in our bedroom, but treat it as if it's an unexploded bomb? Just carefully go up the stairs. And I owe that to Sarah Lucas, my first exhibition. She gave me the confidence to do this first exhibition, installation, however you look at it.
It's amazing. And so the whole concept behind your exhibition was you sort of deface the artwork in some way. So what was it that you did to Sarah's?
Well, with Sarah's, because of her stance, her political stance, I wanted to be... We've just struck up this art relationship, and I wanted to be the bad partner in the relationship because I was the one doing the damage. So I'd done quite a grotesque thing to hers. Oh, it would be grotesque in real life. Sarah works a lot with, or used to work a lot with cigarettes. So I'd done something quite grotesque, and I burnt each breast, each artwork, as some sadistic boyfriend might do to his partner. So I wanted it to be an abusive relationship.
Right, okay.
So I burnt each breast. It didn't sell when the show come about because it was priced at 18 grand, but people could make offers. It didn't sell. And I didn't intend to do a second exhibition. And so many artists, which is quite strange, so many artists asked if they could be in it again when I do it next time. They wanted to donate another piece. And I thought it was quite strange that people really enjoyed what this person was going to do to their artwork. Yeah. And it evolved and evolved. But on the second show, I said to Sarah, look, it didn't sell. Rather than me give it back and you remake it as a genuine artwork again, can I use it for a second show? And I told her what I wanted to do with it. She said, brilliant, go for it. So it made the face value 2. And what I'd done on the second one, I left the burns in the stockings, I left the burns in the breast.
Yeah.
And her name, as you can see, Sarah on one brick, on the other was Lucas. So I literally turned her within herself and wrote on one Gary, on the other I wrote Mansfield. So she's come back into the abusive relationship. I've dominated her once again, and she's literally turned within herself.
Yeah.
So I wanted it to be quite an emotional and fragile situation that this abusive relationship has caused. And I told her that's what I was going to do. That's what I'd done. She loved it, and I was exceptionally proud of it, and that's why I sent it to you.
Oh, Gary, I love it. I love it. It's so good, and like to know the story behind it as well is amazing. Like, what a really powerful thing to do to someone's artwork. Yeah. I'm a wee bit speechless. Like, it's so good. It's so good.
Well, I did get, and I know this sounds bonkers to anyone listening who's sort of not an artist or doesn't understand, but I got quite ashamed when I got that much not into character. I don't want to sound like a lovey, but I saw it pretty much in my head within context of what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
I saw that I was abusing her for a moment. It's like, I saw it like as an actor doing a rape scene on a woman.
I was just going to say, like an actor.
Yeah, I don't think, because I'm not an actor, I don't think I could pull that off, or I think that scene would really affect me, because I can't disconnect myself from the art, and I didn't hear either. I got a little bit upset on two of the artworks that I made, or that I damaged, and they affected me quite a bit, which is quite strange, really.
But then again, I think it shows like the power of art and how it can carry something with you, and maybe it, I don't know, touched a nerve in some way. But again, I think that's what's so powerful with Sarah's stuff, particularly. You know, it's quite raw. I think it's amazing. And then it's gone on. The exhibition has gone on. You've done a third one as well.
Done a third. The fourth was lined up, and
then COVID. Spoiler alert.
There was a couple of elements that fell apart. It was fine because I funded it all myself, and I have fuck all, but I funded it myself, and I couldn't do it anymore. Yeah. It was just too much to fund it. But I did get funding for the fourth, or someone agreed funding for the fourth, and then they pulled out at the last minute, and COVID hit. So, a couple of elements, but the fourth wasn't there. But the artists involved always want to come back to have their damaged. Oh, and what we done on the second and third, I ended up taking an artwork from one artist, and rather than me damaging it, on second and third, I took a donated artwork from one artist and gave it to another artist that the first artist was unaware of. So they knew that an artwork was going to an artist, but they didn't know who. Because if you knew, for instance, that it was going to be Sarah Lucas working on your work, for instance, if you know Sarah Lucas's work, you'll know that it may well have something to do with cigarettes, tights, breeze blocks, whatever it is that you'll know the stance that she comes from, so you'll know what might happen to your artwork. So I wanted the person I was taking the artwork from to have a bit of vulnerability, and I was donating everything to the Katie Piper Foundation, who, if you don't know Katie Piper, she was a model that got attacked with acid. So she has had her identity completely changed at the hands of another. Yeah. And that was always my little tagline was artwork with identity changed at the hands of another. So it could be an assailant and a victim.
Yeah. It's such an interesting concept of the show. And again, you've got an episode with Katie on your podcast, which again I'll link below, because the theme sort of that runs through the works that you've got here is the idea of identity and barriers, and it's a very sort of interesting
everything I make.
Yeah.
everything I make has got elements of, and I've only discovered this in the last couple of years when I evaluated my work, because normally I just make a piece of artwork, make a different piece, and I'm just going down my little train track of art practice, if you like. At one moment I stopped at the station, evaluated all of the artwork, and then I sort of realised in conversation with friends and other artists about my work that it all goes down to identity, self-worth, time. That, you know, there's these elements that everything is appearing in all of the artwork. So yeah, it's based around those pillars.
So with that in mind, if you move on to image 4, which is Marc Wallinger, and it's called The Threshold to the Kingdom. Now, I think, like most people, know Marc because of the Fourth Plinth project and his Ecce Homo. I had not come across this until you sent it to me, and I found, so it's like an 11-minute long sort of video, and I went and I found a sort of like cheeky phone recording, a bit of a bootleg phone recording of it in a gallery somewhere. And the 3 minutes that I watched, I found it really like, oh my God, it was really emotional. And like, do you want to explain the artwork?
Right, well, what you watched was the third scene of a very short art installation.
Yeah.
Because although that was a work on its own, the Kingdom, what was it?
The Threshold to the Kingdom.
Right, although Threshold to the Kingdom is a standalone artwork, he put 3 standalone artworks together in his exhibition, which was called No Man's Land, in, I think it was 2000 or 2001 at the Whitechapel Gallery. Marc had always been an inspiration for me, and I knew these 3 artworks, video artwork isn't my thing. I can't really connect with it for whatever reason, as much as I've tried. So I knew the artwork that was going to be at this show, but the way he placed these 3 artworks was you'd go upstairs into the gallery. The first film was a train, a view, the camera set in the front of an underground train on the Circle Line. And all it done, it just went along. You had the view that we never see. We only see sideways on a train, don't we?
Yeah.
We've now got the front view. And hanging up, I don't know what happened, but hanging up was an orange high-vis. And I was just you could just see the reflection in the window behind the camera. And I was transfixed onto this orange high-vis. And there was also a spot in the very centre of the screen, but it wasn't always visually the centre, because the train would move and turn, and you've always got this spot in the centre that your eye keeps going back to. And this was the underground, and it was just going round and round in circles. So I saw that as hell. Next was his, I don't know the name of this artwork, but it's his very famous police box stroke TARDIS that's made out of mirrors. Do you know of it?
Yes, I know it. I've seen it. Mm-hmm.
Right, it was in a small square room. There was probably 10 feet of space either side, and a passageway going from artwork 1, we're in artwork 2, the passageway led to artwork 3. And in the first room you can hear this, which was the underground, you could hear this distant monk, this chanting music, you know, that you go into the next room, the music gets a little louder. And we're now in the room with the TARDIS, mirror TARDIS. And where we were standing, you can see people walking from one room to another, but they vanish into this TARDIS because it's made of mirrors. It's nigh on invisible because you're just getting reflections of the white walls, and you'll see someone walking along. It's like walking along behind me here. They walk along, all of a sudden they vanish, and you're looking, then they reappear again, and it's as if they have vanished into time. And it's like that, as if that TARDIS was actually doing what Doctor Who done. You know, went from one world to another in a matter of moments. And it was just extraordinary. I've never experienced anything like. I've only ever viewed art up until that point. I've never experienced it properly until I saw this. And at this point, I still didn't think hell and purgatory. You know, that's it felt like later on, when I was, or very soon after this, I realised what it meant to me. And I went in the last room, which was the kingdom that we're talking about. And it was just simply a view from Stansted Airport's arrivals lounge. He'd set up a camera smack in front of the arrivals doors that were always shut. They had a guard sitting next to them. And this music, this chanting music, had got even louder. And he played this film that was slowed down to possibly 25%. And every now and then, the double doors would slowly open and people would come through carrying their cases. And it's because it's the arrivals lounge, they're coming through and they're looking for their family or, you know, people who are meeting them. And you see them looking around, you see them slowly smiling and waving. And it dawned on me, I was like, fuck, this is heaven. The guard is St. Peter.
Yeah.
These are the gates opening and people are coming into heaven. They're looking around for their loved ones. There's the odd lonely person who just walks in and doesn't look around because there's no one to meet him. And then it just connected with me, and I've got this music, and then I've realised that was purgatory just there. That was hell. And I was like, fuck, and I've sat watching this film for like an hour. And it's just, and people are just coming in, looking at it for a few minutes and then walking out. And I was like, don't you see this? Don't you see what I see? It was just such an important thing to me. It was the biggest art experience at that point, and I've never matched anything to it, even close to it since.
Yeah, it sounds like an almost sort of outer body experience, but like that you were having when you realised that it's just. And I only watched 3 minutes of it, and again, it was most of it was sort of single businessmen coming out or like cabin crew and things coming out, but it's the music as well, and it's on this humongous screen, is it not? It's this huge thing. And even sitting in my wee room in Scotland, I was like, this is bonkers.
It was nigh on life size with distance.
Yeah, but so good. So thank you for introducing me to a work that I had no idea about. It's so interesting. But this is what I love about doing this podcast, because everybody is interested in loads of different things, and it's just a really nice way of, I don't know, learning and experiencing things.
Definitely, I'm with you there.
Yeah, I mean, you must, oh my goodness, like you're almost at 100 episodes, are you not, of your podcast?
Yeah, 91 has just been released as we record this.
Yeah, amazing. I've met some amazing people. Right, so we've got a couple minutes left, so let's talk about the last image, which is Sarah Maples' Nazi Sexy Shark Show.
Yeah, Sarah Maples' Nazi Sexy Shark. Nazi Sexy Shark.
I was going to say, what a mouthful, but you also.
Sarah Maple, she's an artist that I discovered a few years ago, and she quickly, in my head, I've got sort of categories of favourite artists.
Nice,
I've got my favourite old timers. I've got my favourite conceptual artists that have my favourite contemporary artists that have always been there from the start, and then I've got my current artists. You know, the artists that are moving and making steps at the moment. And pretty much as soon as I saw Sarah's work for the first time, she barged her way into that new realm, you know. She's a British Muslim, feminist, she's political, and she's funny. There isn't enough humour in the art world. She makes humorous artworks with very serious undertones. And, you know, if you're either laughing with her or against her. She's done her artwork in such a way that she's not allowing anyone to sit on the fence.
Yeah.
She says you're either with me politically as a feminist or not. You're not sitting, you know, she doesn't let you sit on the fence. And sometimes you don't realise that she's nudged you off the fence, you know, or she may have even nudged you to the other side for a few moments. But she is amazing. And I've got to know her, I've got to know her work. She was in Face Value 3, And then she just had a show at Jealous Gallery recently called Sarah Maple's Nazi Sexy Shark Show.
Yeah.
She was doing something with Sky Arts.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to produce an artwork in the format of a sitcom. It shouldn't work. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It sort of answered questions about her previous work. It gave you information about the starting points of her previous work, you know, or which you presume were the starting points to her work, you know, the situations that she made within the sitcom. And a sitcom shouldn't work as an art format. And she, for me, absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, I've respected her hugely as an artist before, but I could have easily stood up and clapped when Nazi Sexy Shark Show finished airing. And it's called that because when she was thinking about like a catchy name to call the show, one of the producers for the show said, well, the 3 top things that men search for are Nazi related, sexy related and shark related. It still tells you a lot about the average man.
It really does.
It?
It's quite frightening.
Exactly. And yeah, so she thought, well, rather than come up with a witty name that's associated to those, bang, Sarah Maple's Nazi Sexy Shark Show.
It's so good. I got to the show at Jealous actually, and I thought it was brilliant. And I only caught a little smidgen because they were playing that. So it's like you said, her show is available on Sky Art. So this is where everyone kind of turns against me when I say I don't actually own a television. One of those people. She has 2 phones and doesn't own a television. What is my problem?
I like that.
But I got to see a little bit of it in the gallery, and it was the scene between her and David Tennant actually. So I was like, oh,
brilliant.
Timed this perfectly. And it was just so funny. Crawley Soho House. What even is that?
Exactly.
Just really good at poking fun and calling people out on stuff. She's just so good. It was so good. And I loved the marble plaques that she does because
excellent.
They remind me of Gombriches.
Did you see what they were?
What they said?
No, why they said it. They were newspaper headlines that she's had chiselled into marble.
Oh, I thought this was just like her imaginative.
No, they're newspaper headlines that she's had set into marble.
Oh, I love that. She's so good. She's so good, and I'll leave a link to the show. And again, you interviewed her for your podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll leave a link to that. But she's just brilliant, and she's definitely one to watch as well. Like she's a really interesting. Yeah.
And the question could be, if she was a man, would she be a couple of rungs higher up the ladder?
Very good question. Very good question. Because she won a very prestigious award in 2007. She won a Saatchi Art Awards, and this is also what part of the show is. She's kind of been like, so it's 13 years on, and I was projected that I was going to be this superstar, and it's not really turned out like that. But I would agree with you. I would completely agree with you.
I mean, I'm not putting the question out there.
Yeah.
I suppose I am in a way, but she's just, every time I see her artwork, a new artwork, I have a little bit of excitement. And there's a couple of artists that works for me with. And then I know if they're making my mind and heart race, I know they've become a part of me, if you like, whether they like it or not.
Well, who would complain? Gary, thank you so much. Where can people find you and what you're up to?
My site on Instagram, my name on Instagram is Mizog Art, MIZOGART. My website has come down and it's being built back up again pretty much as we speak.
Nice.
Which would be garymansfield.co.uk or theministryofarts.org.
Nice. And people can find what you're up to on your Instagram as well as your website when it's up.
Exactly. And the podcast that we spoke about is called the Ministry of Arts Podcast.
Amazing. Gary, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You've been an absolute eye-opener for me in so many ways, not just with your podcast, but the images that you've sent me. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Joe, it's brilliant to be on. Excellent. Love what you do.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
The Joe's Art History podcast. I would just once again like to take this time to thank Gary for coming on the podcast and speaking so passionately about the artworks which have inspired him, but also being so open and honest about his past story. He's a really interesting person, and I would thoroughly recommend that you go and follow his Instagram page. There's a link below in the show notes, as well as go and listen to his podcast, the Ministry of Arts podcast. There's a wealth and a complete back catalogue of episodes all around really interesting artists, just a real fountain of information and discovery. And I would just say go and check it out. It's new year, try a new podcast, let's go for it. If you've liked what you've heard today on the podcast, please make sure that you like, rate and subscribe. And while listening, if you think anyone that you know might be interested in learning or hearing about what Gary's been up to and the art that's inspired Gary, then hey, why not pass it on? It would be great to get more people listening to the podcast. If you would like to get in touch, you're very welcome to. You can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram @joesarthistory. As said previously in the podcast, all artworks that were referred to throughout this episode will be available to view on my Instagram highlights, as well as on my website. Links for them are also in the show notes below. Finally, I would like to thank you, the listener. I have been Jo, your resident host and art historian, and thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to welcoming you next time on the Joe's Art History podcast. Until then, keep learning and remember, art is for all. Happy New Year. Let's hope 2021 is so much better than 2020.